Hello, everyone. Welcome to this workshop. I'm Michelle Gannon, Director of the Writing Center. I want to encourage you as you're working on papers to come to the Writing Center. We can help you. We have trained writing consultants who help with all sorts of writing assignments in all subject areas. And we would welcome you to the Writing Center if you haven't been there before. The blue-gray sheet has information about the Writing Center, including our contact information, our hours. We're doing the longer hours now. We also have an online writing center, as you can see, for those of you who are taking distance courses. And there are answers to commonly asked questions about the Writing Center as well. On the back side, there are instructions for how you can schedule an appointment online. And the gold sheet has our list of remaining workshops. So you can see we're on the back side here. The workshops coming up, revision strategies. I would encourage you to go to that workshop. Prentice Clark does a really great job explaining revision strategies. And some others that might be of interest to you, the using commas and other punctuation. And at the very end, the very last item, November 28th, we're having what's called a write-in. It's from 7 to 11 p.m. in this room. You can drop time between 7 and 11. Half of the room will be devoted to just working on your writing. The other half, we will have consultants, writing consultants here on hand to consult whatever writing you're working on. You can get help. And we'll also have free food and drink that night, so take advantage of that. So the workshop for tonight, writing your scientific research paper. Our presenter, Jeff Westner, Assistant Professor in the Department of Biology. Please give him your complete attention. Toward the end of the workshop, I'll distribute comment cards. If any of you need to have an instructor notified that you were here or an advisor, you can list that person on the comment card. For those of you who are interested in paw points, put your student ID number on the front of the comment card, and we'll make sure you get your paw points. Okay, without further ado.
Thank you, thanks for coming. I'm going to get a quick poll of the class if we could. So I think there might be some, like a mix of undergrads and graduates. So if you're an undergraduate, can you raise your hand? And then graduate students, I recognize some of you from the hallway I see every day. So the comic that I have up here is PhD comics, which your graduate students might know about, but that actually has a point, okay? And the point is, probably 50% of all the comics on this, it's a popular comic strip for academics. Probably half of all the comics are about like writing and how stressful it could be, and like how you want to start but you don't know where to start, and you hand in a draft and you get these terrible comments back or whatever. And this is directed at people who are academics, right? And so the reason I put it up is because this kind of stuff, simply writing a research paper, which either you do for a class or you do for your research, no one sits down and knows how to do that, like off the bat, right? Essentially, it's a hard thing to learn. So that's the reason we have this workshop. But it also means that I can't quite in 50 minutes give you all the ways to do your research paper. But what I want to do in this class is try to give you a couple of tricks that I use when I'm writing. And I learned these just by trial and error, really, but also by some cool tips from learning about people who are really good writers. And so what I want to do is just kind of walk through the structure of a scientific research article, and then we'll practice different ways of thinking about where to start in your writing. And so another poll I want to ask is, how many of you have a project that you need to write either this semester or coming up soon? Just raise your hand. Most of you? Okay, that's good. So I think we can probably practice your own writing after here a little bit, right? So the basic idea of scientific writing is to get a message across, and it has these I don't know if you call them constrictors, whatever they are, these constricting elements, right? So anything you would ever write as a scientific research article typically has like headers for all of these things: the title, the abstract, the introduction, the methods, results, discussion, citations, tables, figures. The people that wrote that like just won Nobel Prizes recently won Nobel Prizes writing their papers in this way, right? It was someone who did the laser stuff for LASIK eye surgery discovered that, published that work in a scientific research article, and had to start somewhere. 30 years later, they win a Nobel Prize, right? So this is the structure. I'm going to give you just a quick kind of rundown. I'm not going to spend a lot of time defining each of these sections because I want to kind of get to how you might start your research paper and organize these. I won't go to the title and abstract, but we'll just start with the introduction, right? So the purpose of an introduction is simply to give your reader knowledge of what is known, what is unknown. And a good introduction actually has like narrative structure and tension. And as you're reading more scientific articles, you're starting to write your own, introductions that people want to read actually do have like some intrigue to them, right? And so the second piece of this will be to basically a way to build intrigue in what can otherwise be like kind of dry writing oftentimes, right? Sometimes it's hard to know if you how to make a story out of a scientific research article, but you can, and you can stand out in your writing that way too. All right, so methods then, you've got this great story you just set up in the introduction, you've got a method section. The method section is seemingly simple. It's just what you've done, and you generally try to write your methods in a way that other people could do the research later if they needed to. If you're writing this for a class, the method section is often like kind of hard to write because you know your instructor knows what you did. You're like, why do I have to tell this person what I did when they already know what I did? It doesn't make any sense, right? But you're never really writing for your instructor, or you're not writing for your professor or your major advisor. You're writing everything you write, just pretend like you're writing for the world, like it's going to be put out into the interwebs, and someone is going to read it that doesn't know you, right? And they may want to do what you want to do, because it's the purpose of scientific writing. You've got this cool discovery. You want other people to read it, and you want them to understand it. And those things actually are kind of rare in scientific writing. I read a lot of scientific writing. Like, I have no idea what this is. Even though it's in my field, I don't really understand what's going on, right? But the methods at least should be a guide point for exactly what they did. So you've got a clear question in your introduction. You've laid out the methods, what you did. Here's your results. The results should be pretty simple and clear. They do not have to be long. We'll dive into this in a second. And then you have a discussion section. The purpose of a discussion section, and I'm going over this fast, I know, but the purpose of a discussion section is that someone has waded through all this stuff in the methods and the results, and it can get pretty hairy, right? Gene FYC was coagulated with the hormone CY1746. We thought that was a 16-fold higher than CY1475, and blah, blah, blah. And then you finish that section, and it's like, yeah, please tell me what all this means, right? A discussion section is for that. That's what the discussion session is. Someone has spent the time reading the results. They're cool to you. You know exactly what they are. But trust me, you're the only one that knows them as well as you do. And so a discussion section is supposed to be, here's why what you just went through is important, and here's how you're going to use it, right? Citations, I won't get into citations or other workshops on that, on like how to use them and the formats and all that kind of stuff. But they're not trivial. I will say the things that citations signal to your reader when you use them well are, first they signal what's known and unknown. If you can document things that are known and cite them, it gives us a way to go check and trust you, right? And so the main thing is the trust. It establishes the trust between the reader and you. If you can back up your claims, and I know, I'm not going to go read all the things that you cite probably, but at least I know if I wanted to, I could go back to the citation list and find the things that you're saying, right? And so it establishes trust in that way. And of course, it gives credit to other ideas. So you cite people and you cite articles, and you write your own articles, and those get cited. And trust me, it feels really good. When someone cites your work, they're like, oh, they cited it. They actually used it and used it well. The first time I ever got cited, I was sure they were going to cite Westner 2010 should never have been published, and it's a shame that it was, but it was published, but nobody should ever read this paper. I was sure that's what they were going to say about my own work, right? It's published it out there. Anyway, they said, this was cool, they showed this. But citations at least get credit, okay? So you need to get credit. Citations should go in the introduction, right? So you have a lot of citations in the introduction because you're building a rhetorical argument. You're building a case for why someone should invest time in your paper. And that has to come from basically evidence that's, that's otherwise published. And then you'll have a lot of citations in your discussion. You don't necessarily need a lot of citations in the other pieces of your work. So if you have a paper, for example, that has an assignment and we want 10 citations or whatever it is at the end of it, your instructors are going to expect that most of those citations are in the introduction and the discussion. Right? That's where the literature, that's where you put your work in the context of other writing. Have some tables. Those are summary statistics. We will not talk about those very much today. And then, of course, you've got your figures. What I want to suggest to you is that the trick here is that you've got all these pieces of a paper. I'll go really quickly, but any of your syllabi or any writing advice, we'll talk about this too. The real question, the hardest part of writing, is where to start and how to frame your writing for each section. And so the thing I want you to think about if you're writing this research paper is that the question of like how long should it be is irrelevant. No one cares how long it is. They care about you have to make some arguments. They care about being convinced, and you want to lead people through a really good story, right? So you're not just writing for yourself, you're not writing for your friends, you're not writing for your advisor, not even like your close associates. You want like any scientist to be able to read this and understand what you're doing. Right? The easiest way to do that is to build a compelling story within each of these structures. And so we're going to practice that now. The best way that I know how, and this took me a long time, I actually learned it recently from a colleague of mine. His advisor, he'd been working on a manuscript. I said, well, how's the writing coming? He's like, well, I don't know. It's been like a month, and we're still working on the figures. I was like, what do you mean you're still working on the figures? Like, so they haven't written a word yet. They're working on the figures. And I thought, I kind of do that. I think that makes a lot of sense. So we're going to practice that here. Any paper you read or anything that you do yourself, you don't need to start with the title, the abstract, then go to the introduction and your writing, and then go to the methods. Right? None of these have to be in order for the way you write, and in fact, no one writes that way. Sometimes the easiest thing to do, if you're not quite sure how to frame your research, is to start with a figure. So instead of that linear kind of title, introduction, abstract, research, instead of all of that stuff, think about starting with what the figure is, because you can learn a heck of a lot just by looking at the figure. So we're going to try that now, and then we'll try it with your own research here in a second. But I want you to just take a few minutes. This may take 4 to 5 minutes. Look at the figure that's on the paper in front of you. You have no idea what that study is or where the data came from, but I want you to see how much you can answer for each of those sections. So look at the figure and answer. Give us a sentence that might relate to that figure for the introduction, maybe a sentence that would go in the introduction, one that would go to the methods, the results, or the discussion. You can be creative for the introduction and discussion. I realize you can't do everything from a single figure. Come up with a reason you might think something you might write in those two areas. There's no right answer. No wrong answer.
Thank you.
We'll take another 30 seconds or so. It's okay if you don't have the whole thing finished. All right, so probably never seen these data before, because I don't even actually know where they come from. From a textbook I teach from, but I can't remember where they come from. So I've never actually seen the paper behind these data either. But let's see what we can get from this. Let's start with like the methods. Who has a good sentence that might describe a method sentence you might see just by looking at this paper? What can you derive based on what they did just by looking at the figure? I think they need to speak into the mic.
Yes, if you can hold down the mic button and for the mic that's closest to you and speak into it, then everybody will be able to hear in this kind of this weird room that we're in, and also the distance people will be able to hear you.
And we'll just sit here until someone answers.
Just keep holding it down while you speak.
So what I have is, so we measured the CO2 uptake in Quebec and Mississippi using the method described in.
Yeah.
It's a citation comes in, so
Okay,
by these people at this article.
Okay.
Yeah.
So measured CO2 uptake in Quebec and Mississippi
Using this published method.
using some method. We don't know which one. Okay. Anybody else want to add something? Yes.
So I'll go for the one I wrote over here. So the CO2 uptake was measured in the cited article in different locations randomly in order to get the impact of urbanization in the CO2 uptake.
Okay. So actually, I like those two things that stood out there. One, you had an active voice, and yours is passive voice, and both are fine. If you feel like, I personally prefer to just use the active voice. I did this, or we did this, versus this was measured, which would be passive. But either one is fine. And I like you had randomly. What do you mean by randomly?
So randomly means actually, so not in a specific location, but in different places we measured the carbon dioxide uptake, because I choose this, I look at this image and see that it's two different places. So CO2 uptake can be impacted with different reasons. So to measure the impact of some different reasons, we may need to look at with the random, maybe random.
Yeah, you would. Okay, yeah. So take it from experimental design. Just fundamentals of experimental design. You would presume you didn't already know what the measurements were or something. How about somebody over here? Can you add anything to this? Is it really good? How many measurements did they take? Oh, fuck. Nice. 21 each. Okay, listen. You guys have no idea what this paper's about. You just told me what they did, what they measured, where they measured it, and how many times they measured it, right? How'd you figure that out? He said, hey, into the mic. You proud?
I count each one.
Each one what?
Each city, Quebec and Mississippi.
How do you know their cities?
I don't, but I just mean I count each dot.
Okay, yeah, each dot, right? So we know in a standard graph like this, you'll see these things like each dot in this case is something that they measured, right? And they measured 21 of them. We can count the dots up. I actually counted 20, but this is what I got too, right? You're probably right, 21. And you can say something. I measured CO uptake in Quebec and Mississippi n equals 20, and we should be able to go to your figure and see exactly those words, right? So this is what I would put in my paper if this was my paper. I started with this graph. Be simple. Like I measured this, and then I would cite exactly how you measured it. You'll put more detail in there. All right. So you haven't seen it. Now give me the result. What's a result from this?
Quebec has a more spread throughout the graph. So each city or it has it's more spread out each dot, and the average and the median is higher than what Mississippi's is. Mississippi's is through it's under 25, and Quebec goes over 40.
Great. So anybody want to add to that? So that was excellent. Like you've mentioned the two things we want to get out of a graph like this, right? You don't just want to say it's higher. One is higher than the other. Yes?
We have one person online, Marjorie, the CO2 average in Mississippi.
Yes. So we want to say, yeah, we want to say it's higher, and then you gave even more information, two things that you often want to know about data, right? Which are, yes, it's higher, and then we want to know by how much, exactly, like, is it 1 micromole per whatever this is, micromole per square meter per second, or is it 10,000 micromoles per square? Both are higher, and then we give what we would call the effect size, right? So, so we know in Quebec it's higher, and if you're not familiar with box plots, these box plots are just summarizing the data, right? Some people might plot this without the dots on there. Like they might just plot the box plot itself, right? But presumably there are data underlying that. And so the horizontal line there is the median, right? So it's just like you said, whatever the median is in Quebec, you would state that, and you state what it is in Mississippi, you might say it's twofold higher in Quebec than Mississippi or whatever it is. Those are exactly what I had there too, right? CO2 uptake in Quebec is twice as high as CO2 uptake in Mississippi, and give the approximate averages. You would calculate these yourself, not just take them from the figure. And then cite the figure, right? So you've got a graph, you spent all the time in your graph, and you started your methods, and you started your results. You probably know the more things you would say, especially in the methods, like we want to know the methods you use to measure CO2 uptake, we want to know what you meant by Quebec, what the dots are. I assume there are plants here, I assume there are cities, that's fine. So all kinds of detail, but all of that detail should be in service of explaining this graph. Now you know what to put in your paper, right? So let's try the kind of harder, but you also just make them up. So what about the introduction? Give me a line in the introduction for this.
Well, I have it like CO2 is one of the components that used by green plants to capture and store the solar energy that can be used by other organisms.
Why would you put that in the introduction?
Well, I mean, CO2 is one of the components for photosynthesis, right? So I think like measuring the CO2 uptake would be an indication of how the plants life in those two areas, right? Or how the distribution of the plants.
Okay, yeah. And did you have another one?
Oh, yeah. Well,
For my intro, but this graph shows us the difference of CO2 uptake in 2 different areas.
Okay, so that might be something, that would probably be in the figure caption or something. In the introduction to the intro paper, I would stick broad. Yes, anything else?
So my intro is for the CO2 uptake is nowadays affected by the urbanization and modernization around the world. So deforestation and for the urbanization, industrializations are the main reasons that increase the CO2 production as well as reduces the CO2 uptake.
Wow, that was more than I had. We should just write the paper, actually. So that's great. So, and like, you mentioned CO2 as this general thing. You don't care about it right now in Quebec or Mississippi, right? Who doesn't care about CO2 uptake? I mean, like, honestly, we wouldn't, what? We wouldn't eat without CO2 uptake, right? It's literally the way that you build carbon in your bodies. And so you could start with something like CO2 uptake is important for this whatever reason, right? And then you're narrowing down into the actual study that you didn't measure across the entire Earth, you measured in these 2 places. But the introduction, you would build this broad thing. How about the discussion?
How could we level the CO2 uptake in Quebec and Mississippi and make it even?
Okay, why would you want to do that?
You got me there. I don't know.
I guess, yeah, I mean, maybe your study does want to do that because Mississippi is running out of food for its crops because of lower CO2 uptake or something, right? I don't know. Is there, what's another discussion point you had? You haven't had any from this table? Do it.
So I just put down that we believe that the difference in CO2 uptake between these 2 locations is due to blank. So I'm assuming that they probably talked about it in the intro, some reasons why they think that there is a difference, so you could talk about that here.
Yeah, right. So presumably they got funding for this, and they didn't just tell them we're going to measure it in Quebec and Mississippi, give us money, right? But they had to have a reason. So you might come up with a reason for that. So like that's what the discussion is going to do, right? It's going to take these results. Someone has worked through them. They know what you measured in Quebec, Mississippi, and now you're going to take them and tell them why they should care about that again. It could be the ideas could be repetitive from your introduction to your discussion session, right? It should be obvious how you're going to frame this in the discussion. I like to start off. Then it would be the first sentence of my discussion. If I can't answer it, then I need to think pretty deeply about my project again, right? So I don't know what the most important result of the study was. Pretty like, it just is what it is, right? But in the discussion section, that magnitude of difference is similar to what so-and-so found in 1994. That gives our study that's no longer standalone, right? It gives it a comparison with what other people have found. And in the introduction, if I'm worried about geographic variation, I will mention CO2 uptake is critical for predicting future climate changes. This all came from a figure that you knew nothing about, except how they label their axes and their data. So now I want you to try this on your own. So on the back of that paper, think about your research project. But if it has data, this will be easier for you. If it doesn't have data, then come up with something, I guess. Research project. Give us the main figure. Take like 3 minutes, do it fairly quick, but give us the main figure that that would explain your research project or what you think it would be. So either it's your data that you have, like this. It can be a regression graph, or it can be whatever kind of graph you want. Just a messy graph that's labeled with its axes. Yeah, the graph, but label the axes, and you don't have to do all the dots or something, but if you want to draw where the mean and variation is, do that. Okay, so we'll finish in like take another 10 seconds and wrap up your figure. Okay, you've got this great figure, and now I just pass it randomly to the person next to you, and then that person answer methods and results. See if you can talk about it. You don't have to write it down necessarily, but you might want to like take a little bit of time, think about it, write it down, and see if your figure conveys methods and results to the person next to you. This is fun. This is hard. Just do it. Everybody's usually going to be terrible. It's no big deal. There's a reason that I'm not writing my own. Okay, he's going to be terrible. And I don't know if you're online. I don't know if you can share the figures, but see if you can write your methods and results online.
Maybe the group that has the smallest number.
Now I actually think about it.
Yeah.
Okay. Get it? That's good. That's a draft, right? Okay, yeah. But that's what you want. You want to like, it should work for, I know you guys, maybe you all know, because you're coach, you probably know what to do. Yeah, like the hardest part is like, you might be the reviewer on your page, not these guys. How are y'all doing?
You want question there given, or if not, you want.
Your methods are okay, yeah. So in this, I would just flip the axes. And then you expect to how the relationship exists with the temperature warm. In this case, so 4.5 times 30 degrees. So you're going to shower.
What's on the base camera?
They got rid of their picture of those two. There's a picture of Jesus with these two goats.
Yeah.
It was gone. It was there.
Oh, but it's not.
Curious.
Yeah.
But they did
Oh, no, let's forget.
Oh, okay.
This is so weird. Crow thing, it's not showing the picture.
So what is
No.
What's it like? Our purpose.
Okay. So what would you add?
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So, yeah.
While they were taking pictures, they invited the guests to go into the creation thing, and I was like, it was specific and a hostile area.
All right. I won't make you read these out loud, but I hope it was instructive. I have one more thing to share with you. And so we'll leave the figures thing. I hope this helps and that you'll go back. Always start from that. And when you're, I'm not done yet. When you're reading someone else's work, when you're reading a paper and you don't know what the field is, you don't know what the result is, often I skip everything and I try to find a figure. Because if they've invested time in this figure and it looks okay, then I know that like most of the story is there. And then I try to say, all right, this is what I think they found. This is, okay, now I see what they did. Now I see where the big thing. And then I go back and read the justification for it or whatever. Maybe I try to find some of those results that I'm really interested in the results section. And if it's well written, then everything that they're writing should make sense to me, should make sense to you when you're reading by looking at the figure, right? And if it doesn't, it's not always your fault as a reader, right? So that's just kind of, you're in charge of presenting this information clearly to your reader, and this is one way to do it. The other thing you're in charge of is presenting these data not just clearly as a figure or whatever, but also giving a reason to care, giving your reader a reason to care. So that's, we'll just have a few minutes, but I want to just show you a couple of tricks for how to write. This is mostly the introduction section. It can be hard, like where do you start? What do you focus on? How do you transition into your own work, right? Oftentimes we get stuck talking about lots of things and it's hard to like break it down into exactly what we're doing because we're all doing very, very specific things within a broader realm. So your entire paper should have some sort of narrative arc to it. And this is just like basic storytelling I pulled off the internet. But it helped me when I was thinking about writing. Writing really is, no matter what discipline you're in, it is building a compelling story. So this is like narrative arc of a movie or any good book. So if you think of Titanic, the exposition is like they're about to set sail on this big ship, everything's grand. They're giving us the big like picture. In Titanic, you know what's going to happen, but at least you're still interested in it, even if you didn't. It's like, this is cool. I want to like go along the ride with them, right? And then there's rising action. There's some tension between the characters. And you think that's going to be the thing, it's this love story that's gone wrong or whatever it is, right? And then there's a crisis. The ship sinks. Oh no, what are they going to do about that, right? That's the crisis. There's a climax, they're saved, there's beautiful music, they get in a ship, and then the resolution is the woman on the ship lived a long life and had these great memories or something. I can't remember what the resolution is to Titanic, right? Your own research paper, though, is the same. The exposition is your introduction section. It should set that stage to help people get invested in the story. The rest of it will follow. I want to focus on just 2 tricks for the introduction. We only have like 5 minutes, is that right?
10.
Okay, so we're okay here. Yeah. So the 2 things I want you to take home with you today, start with your figures, but also build intrigue to your story. Right, so make people care about that figure that you just invested time in. You do that in the introduction. It's what is known and what is unknown. And the narrative trick that I want you to try, since we do have some time, we might try this on your own now, is that often when you hear scientists talk, if you've ever been to a scientific research or you've read a lot of papers, we are terrible at talking, right? We will tell you, this graph shows that, and as you can see, this graph shows this, and this graph shows that, and this table says this, these data say this, I got these birds here, and they did this, and they do that, and then in summary, the conclusions are here, right? And you get out of that, and you're like, I didn't I don't know why. What did I really learn from that? I don't quite know what I learned from that. Just, like, I struggled with this for a long time. But I got this idea, and but and therefore, from a scientist who used to be a research professor, but is now a screenwriter in Hollywood. And there's a good TED Talk. I don't have time to show you the movie, but it explains all this. And he got the idea from Trey Parker of South Park. And Trey Parker said, here's how I write. I start a draft and write the things I want to say for whatever the scene is. And often there's a lot of the word and in there. Hartman did this, and so-and-so did this, and so-and-so did this, and so-and-so. And he says, I go through that draft, and every time there's an and, I try to replace it with a but. Cartman did this, but, who are the other characters in South Park? I can't remember. But so-and-so did that. The simple replacement of that gives you some tension in there, right? And the therefore is the resolution. That's where you're going to tell us exactly how you resolve the tension in your paper. So you might say, I don't know anything about chemistry. A person like me, you're not going to say that, but you know about chemistry. You might say, this inorganic molecule is such and such structure, and this molecule is such and such structure. And if I'm reading your paper, I don't have to know what such and such structure is. I'm looking for the but. I'm looking for, but we don't know how they interact, right? As a simple statement, like how they interact in a base liquid or something. Making stuff. Right, so immediately now you know where the paper is, you know what it was going to be, and then the therefore is, therefore, I did all this cool work, and I did this experiment, and I'm going to tell you about it, right? So here's an example from another example, similar. My students in 280 are working on like public health data, and they're often interested in things like child survival, child mortality rate, health spending across countries. This is from an introduction of a paper that might be written. Child survival varies widely among countries. It's cool. Health spending varies widely among countries. And then they'll say, I study the relationship between child mortality and healthcare spending. That seems okay, but there's no tension there, right? So if we replace those things, child survival varies widely, health spending varies widely, but it's unclear whether health spending improves child survival rates. We know they both vary, but here's what we don't know, right? Therefore, we measure that relationship between these across 152 countries, and then now you're rocking, right? You know what the background is, you know what the problem is, and you know what you're doing to solve it, right? So somebody over here, for example, had different types of shoes, I think. Okay, take your types of shoes, and everybody take your research project then. For your research project, come up with, say, 3 or 4 sentences Okay, so I'm not going to call on you, but I want you to take home what you've written, and you can share it with your friends on the walk home or whatever. But in your writing, I would also like to remind you, especially if you're doing original research, it's a huge privilege. This is the coolest thing in the world. You guys get to come up with new ideas, right? And even if they sound simple, like it's a diet of crickets or something. No one knows about a diet of crickets in the world. It's the only person. So focus on your writing, and if you really work at the craft, it doesn't necessarily have to be the best idea in the world. Communicating a good idea is 90% of the challenge in science. And so work on that writing, and I hope this helped a little bit. And you have something to take home with you. Thank you for coming.
Do you have any idea if this can be counted as cap hours?
I have no idea. It's a writing center workshop, so.
I'm assuming it would. I have this sheet.
Oh yeah, I've signed those before.
That'd be awesome.